There's something that happens in the exact moment someone makes a decision. Before it, everything is possibility. After it, there's a direction. It doesn't have to be a huge decision or one that changes everything at once. It can be as simple as writing the first word of something you've been putting off for a long time, or drawing a line across a page that until that moment was completely blank. In that precise instant, something that didn't exist starts to exist. Something that could have been anything starts to become something specific. That moment, that step from open space to the first defined form, is what the number 1 represents as a symbol. To understand 1, it helps to think about 0 first. 0 isn't absence in a negative sense. It's more like a state of pure potential, a space where everything fits because nothing has taken its own shape yet. 0 is silence before sound, a page before writing, an idea before it becomes a decision. There's nothing wrong with 0, but there's also nothing in it that can be recognized as something singular. 0 is the field. 1 is the first thing that appears in it. When something becomes 1, it stops being undefined. It takes on an outline, a direction, a weight of its own. It doesn't matter whether it's large or small, whether it will last a long time or not. What matters is that it can now be pointed to, named, distinguished from everything else. Something that wasn't there before is now there. That, in symbolic terms, is what 1 brings into being, presence where there was only possibility. This idea shows up in very concrete ways in everyday life. The first step of a project that someone spent months turning over in their head. The first conversation that opens something which later becomes meaningful. A signature at the bottom of a contract. Signing up for a class. A phone call that kept getting postponed. In all of these cases, there's a before and an after, marked by a single opening gesture. That gesture, that 1, is what turns potential into something real. It doesn't guarantee anything that comes after, but without it, nothing that comes after can exist. What 1 represents symbolically isn't just a beginning, it's also identity. There's an important difference between those two words. A beginning can be impersonal. It can be the start of something collective, something diffuse, something that doesn't yet have a clear owner. Identity, on the other hand, implies that something or someone recognizes itself as a separate entity, with its own characteristics, with a way of being that sets it apart from everything else. 1, in its most symbolic dimension, doesn't just indicate that something starts. It indicates that something starts to be recognizable as itself. Think about how someone learns to say I with real clarity. Not in the grammatical sense, but in the sense of who I am, what I want, where I'm speaking from. Some people spend a long time speaking on behalf of others, following outside expectations, responding to what their environment wants from them, without ever fully building a clearly defined perspective of their own. When someone starts to distinguish their own voice from the voices they inherited or adopted, there's something of 1 in that. Not arrogance, not hostile separation from the world. Just clarity about what is genuinely theirs and what isn't. A way of knowing yourself before you reach out to others. Symbolic, non-religious numerology associates 1 with ideas like focus, will, initiative, and autonomy. These words can sound harsh or cold out of context, but they point to something simple. Focus is the ability to direct your attention toward something specific rather than letting it scatter. Will is the force that moves from the inside, not from the outside. Initiative is the impulse to start something without waiting for someone else to go first. Autonomy is the ability to sustain yourself through your own internal logic, without constantly needing external validation. 1 as a symbol can help frame any situation where one of these qualities comes into play. It can also be thought of as a line, not a closed figure like a circle, which represents cycle and return, not a plane, which represents open, multiple possibility. A line is specific. It has direction, it has meaning, it goes from one point toward another. It doesn't encompass everything, but it's going somewhere. In that sense, one, as a geometric image, says something very precise about what it represents as a symbol. Not omnipotence, not totality, but clear direction at a particular moment. The idea of unity also deserves its own space here. When we say something is one, we might mean that it's complete in itself before it enters into relationship with other things. That it has internal coherence. That its parts, if it has any, work in an integrated way, rather than as disconnected fragments. A person who has clarity about what they think and what they want can be said to be operating from a place of unity. A project that has defined its reason for existing before seeking collaborators has something of one in it too. Not in the sense of being closed off to the world, but in the sense of having a recognizable identity before it comes into contact with everything else. But one, like any symbol examined honestly, also carries a tension. The very thing that gives it strength can become a limitation if taken too far. Clarity can harden into rigidity. Autonomy can tip into isolation. Initiative can turn into an inability to listen or to take in what comes from outside. When one closes in on itself, it stops being a starting point and becomes a fixed point that can't move. A solid identity is one thing. An impermeable identity is something else entirely. In symbolic terms, the excess of one is often represented as excessive self-sufficiency, a difficulty recognizing what doesn't originate within oneself, a kind of strength that ends up looking more like chosen solitude than genuine autonomy. Not because one is inherently bad, but because any quality taken without counterbalance can turn into its own obstacle. Symbolic numerology doesn't argue that numbers are good or bad. It suggests that each one has a spectrum, and within that spectrum there is both what builds and what can hold you back. Understanding one as a symbol, then, isn't about seeing it as the best position or the loneliest one. It's about seeing it as the condition that makes everything else possible. Without a starting point, there's no journey. Without a first statement, there's no conversation. Without a first step, there's no path. One isn't the whole road. It's the moment the road stops being imaginary and starts being walked. There's something one points to that no other number can point to in quite the same way. The instant when something stops being potential and starts having a shape of its own. Not the entire process. Not the final result. Just that first moment when something that could have been many things chooses to be this. An idea that becomes a purpose. A person who begins to speak from their own center. A line drawn across a blank page that, before it branches into everything that will follow, is simply that, the first mark. Proof that something has begun.